Welcome, class. Happy Wednesday. You should, if you have not already, tonight at midnight, being Wednesday, I'm recording this earlier, but on Wednesday, midnight, 11:59, your exam is due for chapters 11 and 12. We are moving on to chapter 14. That is our next section. And as you can see, chapter 14 deals with mortgages. All right? Mortgages are basically, and as we get into some definitions here, in chapter 12, we learned about annuity payments, right? Annuities, equal payments over equal amounts of time. In the last section of chapter 12, the annuities we looked at were sinking funds and amortizations. And with amortizations, you were figuring out, if I know the present value, what payment do I need under those terms to be able to pay off that present value with interest and premiums, interest and principal, okay? Basically, that's what a mortgage is, and we talked about that. Mortgage is a loan, okay? So let's diving right in, all right? Mortgages are basically loans for real estate. Now, just some terms here as we go over this. Real estate, of course, is land. Mortgages, then, are the loans that you use to purchase land. And usually you use a mortgage because we don't have that lump sum to pay. And so we do it in payments. And so these are usually, since it's such a large sum, the present value is so large, usually those payments are over a long period of time. They do have mortgages for 10 years, and they do have them for 15, and they do have them for 20, but a lot of mortgages are 30-year mortgages. So stop and think. If you get a mortgage, a 30-year mortgage, when you are 30, and you pay it out over the entirety of the loan, you will be 60 once that's paid off. 30 years is a long time. The other thing we also recognize that the more compounding periods you have in an amortization, the more interest you're paying. So think about that. Normally, a 30-year mortgage is monthly. So 30 times 12 is 360 payments. That's a lot of conversions there for interest. So that's just something you have to realize, is that mortgages are for very large sums, usually for real estate. Now, some of these terms that we're looking at, we have FHA, that's the Federal Housing Administration, and that, for certain Americans who don't have a lot of credit history, the FHA will back their loan. So they're the ones that insure the loan for the banks when they give out their mortgage. We also have the VA, Veteran Affairs, and GI loans, and these deal with military. Current, GI would be current military, and VA would be veterans. And they, again, are just organizations that help back mortgages for those who are veterans or current military. Okay? And then for everybody else, we have conventional loans, right? So a conventional loan is just a real estate loan made by a private lender that is not insured by the FHA or the VA. It's just a regular bank loan. Okay? Now, as we deal with mortgages, most banks, when you go to a bank, and that's where you get a mortgage from, or some type of lender, will ask for some type of down payment, knowing that they are not fully responsible for the entirety of the house or the real estate that you're purchasing. So they ask for a down payment. And for most conventional loans, you need 20% down payment on the home. If you borrow more than 80% of the value of a home, then they're going to charge you PMI, or what they call private mortgage insurance. And since it's not backed by the FHA or VA, that is how they back their loan. They make the buyer purchase insurance that if they were to foreclose before that 20% is down, or the 20% equity in the home is paid off, then the insurance would kick in so that the lender would get their money back. Okay? Normally, when you foreclose on a house, the bank would sell the house and they would get their money back. They've collected money up to that point, and then they would sell the house and get money out of the house. So they would usually make their money back. But there's this sweet spot of when they first make a loan, that they potentially won't get their money back if they don't have at least, if the person who is borrowing the money doesn't have 20% equity. So they would just want to make sure the more equity you have in your home, the more likely you are going to not foreclose and pay through it. All right. The last term we're going to look at, well, I guess second to last term, is the adjustable rate mortgage, an ARM, an ARM, and most loans, conventional loans, are fixed rate. The interest rate is the same throughout the life of the loan. We will look at adjustable rate mortgages where over the time of the loan, the interest rate could change. Now, normally when you're dealing with adjustable rate mortgages or adjustable rate loans, initially the rate is really low, and that is intriguing to those who can't afford a lot of house. So if the interest rate initially is low, then your payments each month will be low as well because you won't be paying as much interest up front either. But what usually happens with an adjustable rate mortgage is that the rates adjust up. They never adjust down. So what happens is the longer the life of the loan goes, the longer or the more interest you will pay because the interest rate will go up. The only time adjustable rate mortgages make sense are if you're just going to have a very short-term loan and then you're going to turn around and sell. So maybe you get a 3-year adjustable rate mortgage so that for the first 3 years the rate's guaranteed. After that it'll adjust. But if you know you're going to sell your home within 3 to 5 years, it might be to your benefit just to pay the least amount of interest possible initially, and then when you resell you're going to get your money back and the loan's paid off. That's really the only time it makes sense. Okay? The last thing I'll talk about as we talk about mortgages, borrowing money for homes and things of that nature, are what we call mortgage discount points. All right? So you might have heard points on a mortgage. And what they do is the lender, in order not to have to charge so much interest over the life of the loan and the interest or the loan becomes less marketable, maybe the rates that are being offered are at a point where to be competitive with other lenders, they have to lower their rates a little bit. Well, in order to get some of those rates, the bank, in order to make sure that they're profiting off of your loan, if they're not going to create or receive as much interest, they'll charge points. And basically, they'll charge you up front and say, hey, if you give me a certain amount of money now, I'll reduce your interest rate by a point. Okay, so the discount point is just extra charges that are added to the cost of a mortgage, and it allows lenders to increase their yield, their profit, without having to increase the interest rate. So for sometimes, if you do the math, buying points basically is what you're doing to reduce your interest rate might be to your benefit. If you have the cash up front to pay a percentage, and usually each point is 1% of what you're borrowing. So if you're borrowing $100,000, 1% is $1,000. That $1,000 you pay now to reduce the interest rate might save you thousands over the life of the loan. So points might be beneficial. You just have to be able to do the math. But if you can, for most conventional loans, and if your credit history is good, the conventional loans, you won't need to buy points to get a better rate. Okay? So that's the discount points. You can purchase points to lower your interest rate, your nominal rate. Okay? And of course, closing is that's when the contracts are signed for the mortgage. The buyer and the lender come together, usually with the real estate agent or a lawyer, and that's when the papers are signed and the contracts are signed and the money changes hands. They've done title searches to make sure that the seller actually owns the property, all those things. So that's when all the legal things are done at closing, and everything officially changes hands, and the owner transfers the title and property to the buyer. Okay, the seller transfers everything to the buyer. Okay. So that's closing. So those are the terms. Again, we know what real estate is. That's just property. The mortgage is the loan on that property. We have the FHA and the VA that will insure loans. All right. But then in a conventional loan, that's not backed by the FHA and VAs. And if you don't have 80% or if you borrow more than 80% of the property, then you need private mortgage insurance. And that just guarantees that the lender will get their money back. We talked about ARMs, adjustable rate mortgages, where the interest rate changes over the life of the loan, which they're not good. I don't like adjustable rate mortgages. And discount points. I normally don't recommend discount points, but sometimes if you do the math, it might benefit you to do that. It'll save you money in the long run. And then, of course, closing, when everything changes hands and papers are signed and the legal terms are taken care of. All right, so in section 1, we're going to calculate the monthly payments and total interest on a fixed rate mortgage. Okay, so what we want to do is, we did in chapter 12, we did amortizations, and you figured out the payments. All right. We can also do this with tables, and that's what they're going to walk you through first, the tables. Now, notice here, there's a chart down here at the bottom of 453 in chapter 14, and this is the interest rates. How about this as you look through here? So back in the 70s, interest was below 10%, but it was above 7.5%. 7.5%, could you imagine that? It went as high as 17.5% on a 30-year mortgage. And you've seen how it has come down over the years to where now you can get below 5%, all right? And I believe I'm sitting at a either 3 3/4 or 4% mortgage right now, all right? So it is very inexpensive as compared to what it used to be. But when interest rates were this high in the 70s and 80s, the interest rates on bank loans, or not on loans, on bank accounts, savings and things like that were much higher as well. So even though you were paying more for your mortgage, you were earning more from the bank in savings. Okay? So they were paying out more interest then because they were collecting more interest. So it's just interesting to see this. Okay? So what we want to do is, in the tables, we're going to be able to determine what our payment is. And that payment is a combination of principal and interest. And basically, as you think about your compounding periods, what is happening in that formula is that you are paying interest due on the principal. Whatever the present value is in that compounding period, you are paying interest on that principal each month in full. So that when you've made the payment, all the interest due comes out of the payment, and the remaining amount of principal principal payment comes off the principal, so you have a new principal. And then the next month you'll pay a little less interest because the principal's lower, and so on and so forth. Okay? In a future section, we're going to show how you do that. How you show, here's the principal payment each month, and here's the interest payment each month, so that you can see, and then the benefit of paying more principal each month. So we'll use the tables. What we have to be able to do is understand how the table works. All right. So this is a monthly payment, or to amortized principal and interest, and it's per thousand finance. What that means is that the factor that they're showing here is the amount per $1,000. So we have to be able to know, first we have to be able to figure out how many units of 1,000 are in the money we're borrowing. For instance, if we're borrowing $200,000 for a house, that means there'd be 200 units of 1,000. All right? So that's all you need to figure out there. And then the life of the loan is across the top. Now they go to 40 years. There's really not 40-year loans for mortgages. Maybe larger real estate purchases, but normally it's 30, 20, 15, and rarely 10. Okay? And then the interest rates along the side. Now, as of recently, some of the rates have been going below 3.5. This book will not give problems like that, but I've seen advertisements for 2.5%, maybe even 2%. But that's probably for people with pristine credit. All right. So in order how this works, all right, we got to find the number of thousands. Okay. So that the number of thousands is the amount financed, the amount you're borrowing divided by 1,000. And then using the table on page 454, we locate the factor that we're going to multiply by that number of thousands. And across the top, we know how many years the loan is, and down the left, we know the interest rate. So the monthly payment then would be equal to the number of thousands times the table factor. And then we find the total interest of the loan, all right, by subtracting the monthly payment times the number of payments. And we did this before. How much are we paying out of pocket? Okay, minus the amount financed, and that'll be the total interest of the loan. So it's good to know that. If you have a 30-year loan, you need to know how much interest am I paying? How much extra am I paying for my house? All right, so on page 455, we have a practice problem here. So what is the monthly payment and total interest on a $150,000 mortgage at 5% for 30 years? So how many units of 1,000? Well, 150,000 divided by 1,000 is 150. So there's 150 units. And that's what they talk about here, so 150 units. So the table factor, if I go over here, of 5% for 30 years. All right, so we have 30 years. That's the column right here next to the bear paw. And 5%. All right, so it should be 5.37. And I think that's what they find over here. So 5.37 is the factor. So we multiply that by the number of thousands, 150 times 5.3. And your payment is going to be $805.50. $805. So on a 5% loan, you're going to pay $805 per month. And that's interest and principal. So the total interest then, how many payments are we going to make in 30 years per month? Well, 30 times 12 is 360, right? So 360 times the number, the amount we're paying per month, $805.50 times 360, should be $289,980. So for a $150,000 loan, you are paying $289, almost $290,000. So you are paying $139,980 in interest. That is almost 100% value of what you borrowed. All right? At least 90, right? That's a lot of interest. Mortgages are expensive, and you pay a lot for them. And that's why banks make money. All right? So I would like you to practice. Try it, exercise 1. What is the monthly payment and total interest on an $85,500 mortgage at 4.5% for 25 years? Go ahead and practice that, and I'll come back with the answer.